Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and hello, and welcome to another episode of Wings of Wisdom WoW podcast. My co-host today is Chelsea Allen. Chelsea, how's it going?
Hello, it's good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
All right. We have Dr. Slade with us here today.
Very good to be here.
Dr. Slade is a prominent member of the religion department at Ashland University. He has been enlightening minds since 2006, holding a PhD from the University of Virginia. Dr. Slade has an impressive track record with several books published that explore the intersections of religion, society, and history. His work, especially on the modern Christian thought and the civil rights movement, offers deep insight into how faith influences and is influenced by the world around us. With a passion for uncovering stories that matter, Dr. Slade brings history to life in a way that's both accessible and engaging. We're thrilled to learn about his journey, his contributions to academia, and the wisdom he has to share.
Okay, wow. Is that me?
Sure.
That's I'm pleased to meet myself here. That's great.
In a snapshot.
Yeah, that was. Thank you.
We tried to condense everything that your entire life.
ChatGPT is good at that.
Yeah, there you go. So, Dr. Slade, we're really thrilled to have you here with us today, and let's start with your major as an undergraduate student.
Okay, my major as an undergraduate student. Obviously, you can tell from my voice, I don't come from around here. So I was in the British system, and I went to a university in Scotland, St Andrews. And in the British system, undergraduate, you just study your subject. It's not this sort of broad liberal arts approach. And so I went to undergraduate in Scotland, and I studied theology. I was they had this is more information than your listeners need to know, but it was a college in St Andrews, which it was also a training college for the Church of Scotland. So kind of like a seminary, but also located in an undergraduate setting. So I did what was called a Bachelor of Divinity degree. I'm a BD.
Oh, wow.
And so technically I'm a divine.
Wow.
You see, it's the equivalent of an MDiv. So that's what I did as an undergraduate.
Very nice, very nice. So what sparked your interest in studying theology and religion and its impact on society?
Well, I've always loved history. Maybe your listeners know about this. You have, how do you end up in the college you're at? Well, so when I was in high school, I thought I want to study theology, but I also want to study history. So I came up with a short list of schools where I could do both. And then I decided I was just going to study theology, but I didn't change my shortlist. So from the word go, I've always been interested in history, and particularly church history. And I've been really interested in, so people who go to church, religious people, like to think of themselves as being good folk. And I've been fascinated by moments in history when these apparently good people do really mean things. What makes people who think they're good do bad things? And I think, so when I was an undergraduate, I was very interested in what was going on in Northern, strong sectarian divides, partly rooted in religious difference. And I spent a couple of summers in Northern Ireland while I was an undergraduate and studying what was going on there. And I was very interested in the history of the church in Germany. How do a whole bunch of nice Christian people end up thinking Hitler's a good idea? Yeah, so that was what really interested me as an undergraduate.
Wow,
it's just kind of how I'm wired. It's the stuff I find interesting, and so it keeps bringing me back to that. I think maybe for a couple of different reasons. One reason is my own family's history is kind of caught up in that. My mother's family were refugees from Germany, Jewish refugees from Germany, and then another strange way what brought me to the States, which might be your next question, is I'm a musician, and I became really interested in blues and gospel music, African American musical traditions, And in studying that, I became very interested in the history of the African American experience, the African American church, but also the civil rights movement. And so, yeah, I wound up becoming. I got a real job when I graduated from college, but then academia pulled me back in. So when I was 27, I was like, I'm not in debt. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I can do anything I want. What do I want to do? And I thought, I want to go to Mississippi and listen to blues music.
Oh, wow.
So that's that's how I wound up in the United States.
Very adventurous.
That was my undergraduate, and then a long answer. Sorry.
No, that's a wonderful answer. Can you share a little bit about your journey to becoming a professor at Ashland University? You mentioned Mississippi. You mentioned, I think, University of Virginia, right?
Yeah. Well, so what happened was I went to Mississippi, and it was really I got into a master's program there, the Southern Studies program, and I was not interested in becoming an academic. That wasn't why I was there. I was there because it was very interesting. And while I was there, I read a book. Well, a few things happened. I got involved in what at the time was called the President's Initiative on Race. I was tasked with working with high school students in Oxford, Mississippi, to report to this presidential commission. And it was ridiculous. I was just off the boat. I was going into the high school and working with the peer counselors, these high school students. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. Can you explain it to me? Partly a ruse, but partly true. I had no idea what was going on. But I got involved in sort of contemporary civil rights issues in Mississippi through that. And that seemed like something that was really important. But I also, I read a book called God's Long Summer by Charles Marsh. It was released the year I got there, 1997. And as I was reading it, I had a strange thought. I thought, if I was ever going to do a PhD, I'd like to do something like this.
Wow.
And what God's Long Summer is it tells stories of different people from the civil rights movement in one summer in Mississippi, but it includes the chapter on the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. It didn't just focus on the good guys, it focused on, quote unquote, the bad guys as well. Well, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, he was a bad guy for sure. And later on, I met the author, this guy called Charles Marsh, and he invited me. This is when I'd finished my master's degree. He said, why don't you come and work with me at the University of Virginia? So I was either going to be deported or I would start a PhD at the University of Virginia. So faced with those two choices, I chose the foolish one, obviously. So for your listeners, doing a PhD, it means reading a lot of books. You know that intellectually. But you have no idea what it means to read a lot of books until you actually have to do it. So I survived just about. But I realized, for this podcast, it was the type of writing that actually drew me in. It was being able to write narrative theology, but that were historical narratives. And there was another person's stuff I read, a guy called Will Campbell, who wrote a book called Brother to a Dragonfly, and also a book on a place called Providence. And he interposed kind of reflections with historical narrative. And I thought that was pretty good. And I also thought, I think you could weave them together even better than that. So writing actually was partly my way in.
It's a lot of writing, isn't it? Right?
It is a lot of writing. So, the question was, how did I wind up in Ashland?
Yeah.
So I did this PhD at the University of Virginia, and so if anyone cares how professors get jobs, so you see the end of this tunnel is coming up, and then you've got to earn a living. So you apply for jobs, and you cross your fingers, and you apply for a lot of jobs. And I applied for Ashland, and I really didn't think I stood a chance because the job description looked like it had been written for someone who was already here. So they do that, right? So that people can employ them, the people who are already there, but still do the job search. And it included teaching the civil rights movement and African American church history. And I thought, well, they've obviously got someone who does this, but I'll apply. And I got the job. So here I am. And I said, absolutely. And I signed it. And I said, where is Ashland again? And so So I'd never been to Ohio, but I was delighted to be here. It was a good
Were
place.
you thinking about changing your mind after you knew where Ashland was?
No. No. When you get the phone call and say, we'd like to offer you a tenure track job, you say, oh, absolutely. Again, it's a little hard for people who aren't in academia to realize that you do, 4, 5, 6 years doing your PhD, and then you may never get a job.
Yeah.
And so I am one of the lucky few, and I count my blessings every day that I'm able to have the privilege of studying and writing and teaching.
We're very fortunate to have you with us, Dr. Slade.
Oh, wait, they can see the video. I just pulled a face. For those listening on audio, I just pulled a face.
Well, I had a class
here
with
I
you,
am.
and it was very interesting. You're an enthusiastic professor, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, so my professoring is, well, one of my rules is I only really want to teach stuff I'm interested in. Because if it doesn't interest me, then by definition, I'll find it boring. And then who wants to do that?
Right.
And then the other thing I have, I guess, mostly, and you see this as well, is I don't want to set a writing assignment where I'm not interested in what the person has to say. So some people set writing assignments because you have to write about, I can't teach this subject without this kind of essay being part of it. But life's too short for that. So I'm interested in what students have to say about certain things, and that's what I ask them.
I observed your class last semester, and just yesterday I was talking to, giving a presentation to a group of parents of potential students at AU. And one thing that I stress is that the idea that our faculty here do their best to engage students, kind of like, highly encouraged to participate.
Yeah, well, Dr. Slade he would get excited about something, jump around, be like, oh, I love this. It was very encouraging. We did things where he had us like act out, scenes from the Bible, and a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of people were like volunteered or decided to go up because it was a fun thing to do. So I think that put a different twist on learning religion, which normally isn't all that fun. So I think
No kidding.
I'm passionate. I am, and it was fun.
Right. So some classes you teach, students are there because they have to be, and so. Yeah, why would you make that miserable? I sort of take it as a challenge, I'm going to convince people that I'm going to trick them into thinking they want to be there.
Yeah, the class that I observed was a round table seating arrangement, and it was just a nice mix of academic rigor and engaging conversation. And everyone was there and they had to participate, and I love those classes because students cannot really hide, you got everyone facing one another. And
yeah, I really think, every professor should be able to say this, right? They're doing the subject that they love, right?
Right.
So I think that one mistake you can make as a professor is you think, what will those students find interesting? Whereas, and then you end up doing things that feel forced. Whereas I'm a sort of evangelist for whatever I'm doing, and you think, look, I find this really interesting, so I'm going to model.
Yeah.
Why I find this interesting, and some students will agree with you, and some won't.
Yeah.
But it will feel more authentic, and they'll come away saying, well, at least he was really into it. And one of my colleagues talks about being a professor. He goes, it's not just about imparting facts, right? That's teaching. And you get that in high school. A professors that they tell you what they think. So a sort of spin on how to think, not what to think. That the university says is you actually want, I believe, you want to know what your professor thinks, because I'm professing.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you have to believe me. In fact, if you want to disagree with me, that makes it even more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think students, Chelsea, you can tell me, I think students they don't want their professors to be kind of like secretive about what they actually think about things.
Yeah.
But what students really don't want is a professor saying you have to believe this, and if you don't believe it, you won't pass the class.
No.
They don't want that either.
Yeah, that's the worst kind. Yeah.
Right.
No.
Yeah. So you've got to be careful. But yeah, if I don't do anything else, I hope I communicate that some of the stuff I'm interested in I think is really important, but also interesting and fun.
Right. Eventually with time, that energy, becomes contagious. But again, like with
On a
modeling,
good
Sure
day.
does.
you're exhibiting
With enough coffee.
the energy and the engagement, and eventually over time, students will adapt the approach. So speaking of teaching, how has your approach to teaching changed since the start of your position here at U? Have you always been, a supporter of student-centered approaches?
I think I've always been. Sorry, there's a long pause while the professor thinks about this. I
Of
think
course.
I've always been student-centered in the sense that if you're in front of a dead classroom, it's a miserable experience. So I want student engagement, and selfishly, because otherwise I feel like a complete failure, and that I want student engagement. And so I guess I've worked pretty hard to figure out mechanisms for doing that. And so the size of the class makes a big difference, what you can
Right.
do and what you can't do. When I first came here, I was sort of still in kind of grad school mode. And so two things. One thing is, as a professor, you're aware of everything you're not saying in class, all the other stuff to do with the subject you're teaching. And if you're not careful, it can feel very pressured. Oh, don't leave yet. There's one more thing I've got to tell you, or there's one more thing you need to know. And so one thing I discovered very early on was the classes that were furthest away from my field seemed to go better. Like when I didn't care about how much of the material I covered,
Right.
but we were actually like, we're going to take our time and look at this thing that we're studying. Those classes went better. Whereas the classes where I was just like, if it was like something I was writing about and I'd just been researching for a year, those classes felt very kind of pressured and like I was trying to cram too much in. So I tried, so that's something I'm still trying to learn how to, pacing, like putting less and less in the classes. That sounds slightly odd. The other thing I hated was realizing, so in grad school mode, putting too much in. Then the other thing that grad school mode was every class, because I'm in the humanities, was midterm and a final and a paper at midterm and a final paper. And I realized that wasn't very good. And people are saying, have more smaller assignments like running through. And so now I divide my semester into thirds. And then the advantage is as well that your students, you're not competing with other midterms.
Interesting.
You've got more student attention. So you've got to pull a trick as a professor. The students in your class, I'm giving my secrets away. Tell them what I'm going to do. Here's the deal, right? You know that students aren't going to do all the work for all their classes. But I've got the first week of the semester to convince them they're going to do the work in my class. I'm going to be one of the professors for whom they do the work.
Interesting.
And because it's interesting or because I'm scary or I don't know, like carrots and sticks, that's what you need. And so then I developed something that I call an e-workbook that most people in the religion department now use in upper level classes where every class, they're reading due for every class, and before class, at the crack of dawn that morning, there's this small test that's required that the students do to make sure they've done the reading, but also that the students write down what questions they want to ask about the text. What would be a good discussion starter? So I frantically read through these before class, and then I structure my class around the questions the students are asking.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the class he sat in on Mercy, and I did that.
Right.
And so I've been doing that for a few years now, and that's good because no student likes being in class and you suddenly realize that you're the only person who's done the reading.
Right.
And so the professor's going to keep calling on you.
Mm-hmm.
Or the first half of the class is the professor telling the students what it is that what was in the reading they were supposed to have read. Everyone's wasting their time, right?
Right.
So those are some of the things I've tried to improve. And now, of course, Mohsin, as you know, we're now all of a sudden everything went crazy a year ago when generative AI came in. And so that's making myself and my colleagues really think very hard about what we do in what the assignments are. Because already I'm seeing every semester a significant number of students are using AI. I mean, by significant, I'm talking like a handful, but a handful of students in a class is significant. And I'm assuming more people are using it, but better. I'm not fixing it. So it really has made me think carefully about what it is that I'm doing in class and how do I assess it.
There's a lot of reflection involved in the
I mean, I can
process.
give an example. So in my civil rights class right now, last time I taught it, students wrote sort of research papers, but the research papers were based on the readings we'd done for class. I mean, they were writing their own papers based on readings and maybe pulling in some extra stuff. So this semester, I decided I was going to try something different. So I've got 3 exams where they're writing under exam conditions. But what I'm doing is I'm throwing up a question. We've had one so far. I throw up a really broad question, but there's a genuine question, right? Like, how do you answer this question? And then I give the students, handed out a piece of colored paper. Got 10 minutes. At the top, write your thesis. Now write your 3-paragraph kind of, this is my argument. Now think of examples from the stuff you've studied for the exam of how you would support that argument. And then out come the blue books, and it's okay, now write this paper. So they've written, so it's about writing, and it's about thinking and writing. I'm testing that. And also knowledge of the material we studied in class, but they're writing under exam conditions, and they're using a pen. And now I've got to read it. But I feel that's not dumbing anything down. That's actually a really significant skill to be able to say, okay, I've got this body of knowledge.
Right.
You're asking me a question I've not been asked before. How can I use this knowledge to address that question?
How much emphasis do you put on grammatical accuracy and mechanics?
Well, under exam conditions, I can't put that much emphasis on it. The mechanics, I put emphasis on, is this a constructed argument?
I meant like in terms of punctuation, spelling,
No, in terms of structure of the argument, that's on the rubric.
Okay.
Right? How good is your argument? How good is your conclusion? After that, for a handwritten paper under exam conditions, if I can understand it, that's okay. And that's what it's about, right? Why do we have punctuation? Why do we have spelling? It's to make something comprehensible.
Vehicle.
So if I can understand it, if I can read it and understand it, I'm not going to penalize you. If it's so bizarrely spelled and there's no punctuation, I can't tell where the sentences begin or end, then I'm actually going to find it difficult to understand what you're writing, and then it will affect the grade.
If it hinders communication, or understanding, that's fair.
And that's the reason, right? It's like people forget we have rules, right? We live in a rule-based society, but we forget that they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
So like table manners, like some people think they're totally ridiculous. My kids probably think they're ridiculous, right? But there are reasons behind them. It's so you don't drop your food in your lap, or you don't spit on your neighbor. Why do you chew with your mouth closed? It's so you don't spit your food at people. There's actually good reasons. Why do we have periods at the end of sentences? It's so we can understand when the sentence is finished and we know what you're saying, right? There are actually reasons for these rules. So yeah.
I noticed you said period instead of full stop. Right. We'll get to the American English
because I'm fluent in American-ish.
Yeah, very good. AI, yeah, definitely. That's a whole new world, and we're still, trying to figure out how to navigate that new world.
Yeah.
And what ways we can use that would be beneficial to us as instructors, and also to students as students, and also as future workforce. What's your favorite class to teach at AU?
Well, I exploring the Bible.
Okay.
I love teaching exploring the Bible.
Why is that?
What are you going to say, Chelsea?
Like in relation to that class, what is your main goal, like when teaching your students?
Okay, right. So I don't know who the audience is for this podcast. Maybe I should know.
It's mostly students.
The Bible. So all students at AU, as AU students know, have to take one religion class, and they get a choice between exploring the Bible, exploring world religions, or exploring Christian ethics. And a lot of students end up exploring the Bible. So one of my goals in the class is it is an academic class, right? So you're not gonna, it's not like a repeat of Sunday school. And so some students in the class, they're Sunday school kids, and the Bible is like, woo, my favorite book. And other people in the class are like, I know it's in drawers in hotels, in the bedside table, and but that's the first and last time I've ever seen one. So it's important that nobody is, that just because you're a Christian and this is your book, it doesn't give you it'll give you a little advantage because some of it will be familiar, but it's not giving you a massive advantage. And anyway, most church kids I know, like after Noah's Ark and before the baby Jesus is born in Bethlehem, like they have no idea of what's going on in between there. So my goal in the class is that a friend of mine, a theologian called John Milbank, wrote a book called The Word Made Strange. And you don't need to read the book because it's very heavy. But the title is cool. And the idea behind it is that for each generation of Christians, they need to rediscover how weird this book is. It's very strange. And the idea is that what we do is we domesticate it. We just make it, it's just about being nice. So that's one of my goals, is to make people read it with fresh eyes and to see how strange and countercultural and unusual and odd it is. And when you see things new and fresh, then things jump out. And I think another goal of mine in the class is so a philosopher called McIntyre has this idea of what makes something a tradition is that it's an argument through time. If a community isn't arguing about something, it's dead. Like no one. And actually that's a very freeing concept for me as we read through the Bible, because once you start realizing that this is a book that has been created by a community that is arguing about things. What do we think about foreigners? That's where we are in the class right now, so that's what I'm thinking about, right? Do we read the story of Jericho and think foreigners, we must destroy them all and have nothing to do with them? Or do we think, oh, well, hang on a minute, the book of Jonah, what are we supposed to think about big cities full of strange foreigners? Is God supposed to destroy them, or does God actually love them? And you can see that this is a real discussion going on in the text. And does God prefer sacrifice or obedience? And these kinds of things. That I'm making it sound boring now, but
these are big questions.
Yeah. So they're these big questions. Also, the other cool thing about exploring the Bible is even religious people never go, okay, here's an overview of the whole thing. So it is the most ridiculous class, because the whole Bible in one semester is completely ridiculous. But it's fun to teach and get people who think that this book is, that they're churchy kids and they already think they know everything that's in it, or that they're people who think this is a book that people have just used to tell me I'm wrong. That they too can read this book and find it really interesting, and I enjoy doing that. And I'm not burdened. I'm not burdened by too much expertise. So in college I've done some serious biblical studies, but that's not my main field. And so, what I said before, I don't have that pressure of, oh my gosh, I'm leaving this really important thing out.
Right.
So for example, a couple of my colleagues who are in fact New Testament and Old Testament scholar, like they find exploring the Bible a really hard class to teach. They're just aware the whole time of what they're not teaching.
Yeah. What was your follow-up question, Chelsea?
Well, he kind of answered it. I was going to ask what the importance of religious education is in today's society.
Well, okay, so I've got a few different answers to that. So, I mean, there's the sort of standard answer that why do you need some sort of biblical knowledge? Because you can't understand our society and our literature and everything without having some kind of biblical literacy. If you don't know who the Good Samaritan was, and most of our students probably don't, you've no idea why Samaritan Hospital is called Samaritan Hospital. If someone says, I'm going to employ the wisdom of Solomon here, you really need to know what that is, because he's about to chop something in half and kill it. So, you need to know some of these things. But another reason, so I'm a church historian, and there's so many, to understand what's going on in the United States now, you need to have some religious literacy, but particularly a sort of knowledge of the history of how we've come to where we are right now, to sort of get what's going on. So I just think, why do we need religious education? And then there's the other answer, which is many people you're going to meet in your life in any capacity will be people of some religious association, and to understand them. And if you travel, you're going to meet people of different religions and to understand their culture and have some insight, and not do something really dumb. You need to know, you know,
interfaith
yeah,
dialogue.
interfaith. Well, I mean, not even dialogue. Interfaith coexistence.
Yeah.
You know, you don't bring a ham sandwich to the party, right? For example. So I mean, I think it's really important. And then back to my first answer, I find it really interesting and helpful for me to understand what's going on. So why wouldn't I think other people should?
Right.
I'll share it.
Dr. Slade, you've done a lot of work outside of the classroom too. Can you tell us a little bit about one project that stands out?
Outside of the classroom, I planted apple trees in my garden.
For example, your involvement with the project on lived theology at the University of Virginia.
I see where you're getting at. Okay, yeah, sure. So this guy I went to work with at the University of Virginia had started something called the Project on Lived, Lived Theology, not livid theology. And behind it is the idea that so theology is like what people believe about God. That's all what theology means.
Yeah.
And what makes it lived is the idea that what theologians and students of religion and philosophy tend to do is they read texts. It's what people have written. That's what we study most of the time. But the idea of lived theology is the idea that what people do and the way their communities embody beliefs is something that needs to be studied. Now, there's a big movement called lived religion, which means that you study the practices of, the practices of different faith communities. You don't just read their texts. And a lot of the way world religions is taught, like if you take any world religions class now, you'll study more of sort of practices and stuff. And that comes from this lived religion movement. Lived theology is the idea that that's actually a resource for then talking and thinking about, are these issues true? What impact do they have? So I've been involved with this project on lived theology now for 24 years, which is a bit shocking. I'm so old. And one of the more recently, I've been involved in two projects of writing biographies of significant people who were religious, and writing. We called it a research-enriched narrative. So for the writing center, this is kind of interesting. So it's getting a bunch of professors, like historians and folks, learning how to write, but write in a more compelling narratives. So we found our characters we wanted to write about, and then we kind of got our dream teams together, people to write about them, and then we'd have workshops on, how you write compelling narratives and how you sort of combine historical research into that kind of narrative. So we had two books come out. People Get Ready, and it's two of them. 1 second.
We may edit this out.
I don't even have them on my shelf.
This is great. We're going to keep this
right now. Yeah, but anyway, the most recent one was People Get Ready, and I was the editor of that.
Awesome. Wow. Impressive.
So I wrote my chapter on Pete Seeger, who was a kind of folk singer and activist, he was 90 years old, in his 90s when he died. So then, so I did all this research, and then I was like, well, I can't write about his whole life. It's just a short chapter. And so I ended up writing about 3 days in his life when he was on the Selma to Montgomery march during the Civil Rights Movement, but was able to use that as a lens to look at his whole story. So the writing process, I've learned so outside of the classroom, when you're a professor, theoretically writing is outside of the classroom, though scholarship is part of our job.
Yeah.
And Mostyn, I needed you guys. When I was 15, I was stuck in remedial English class because I can't spell to save my life.
Oh, really?
And then I can't spell. I'm like really, really bad at spelling. And in those days, when I went to college, I hand wrote all my essays because we didn't type them up.
There was no word, yeah.
And I couldn't spell religion. My first essay in theological college, I spelled religion wrong all the way through. So that was how bad I was. But then spell check came along. And that was good. But I never thought I was carrying on with this stuff. And I get to I end up in a master's program, and the first thing I turn in, and they're like, you shouldn't write in passive voice. And I was like, what's passive voice? I've no idea. So I had to learn that. But then I was like, oh, it's just a master's degree. I get into my doctoral program, and I get my first paper back, which was a good paper, I might add. But it said, you shouldn't be employing comma splices at this point in your career. I was like, oh, no. And then I had to go away and look up what a comma splice was. So then I learned how to use a semicolon. By this point, I'm like, in my PhD program, I'm like, oh, semicolons, they're really cool. Yeah, it's a constant learning process. I'm still learning how to write.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's good news for a lot of our students, right?
Woohoo.
Yeah, you're constantly learning how to do it and trying to do it better.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Oh, let's talk about some more serious stuff like that. You mentioned some orange trees?
Apple trees.
Apple trees, okay. Yeah, what's up with the apple trees?
Well, things were going rather badly for the country and possibly the institution. And so I decided to plant some apple trees, and I thought by the time I get apples, all these troubles will be over, but I'll have apples. That was my idea. And one of my colleagues told me last year, he said, oh, that's what Luther said. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, Martin Luther. He said, if you were told the world is ending, what would you do? And Martin Luther said, I'd plant apple trees.
No, you're talking about the European Luther.
I'm not talking about Martin Luther King. I'm talking about the Martin Luther.
Yeah. Okay.
In Germany. But yeah, so apparently I'm not the first person to have that idea. But yeah, and then I watch on YouTube how you're supposed to prune them. So I'm an expert.
Okay, cool.
No, I like to garden. Or I like to chop things down.
Hacking and hewing. Okay.
That's what I do. Pruning, hacking and hewing.
Oh, that's when you plant all the apple trees.
Yeah, that's right.
Chop them down.
Yeah. Apple trees are really weird. Did you know that? So they've been,
no idea.
they've obviously been bred so they have big fruit. But they're structurally not built to support the weight of the fruit they make. Chelsea's like nodding her head. Do you know about this?
They're very small trees.
Well, the small ones are small because those are dwarf. And I accidentally bought a dwarf one. But I've got another one which is full size, which is an heirloom apple tree from West Virginia. Apparently, it wasn't until like the 1920s they started patenting apple trees.
Oh, wow.
And you can't just grow any old apple tree because they won't let you because it's patented. But you get the old heirloom ones and they're out of copyright or something. So anyway, so I've got this old full-size tree. No, so apples are big and heavy. And, okay, I'll have to describe this for the listeners. So apple trees apparently want to grow branches at a very acute angle to the trunk, right? But if they get weight on them, that means the branches snap off. So you have to train your apple tree. You have to make the branches grow out like at 10 o'clock and what would the angle be? 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock. You force the branches to come out more sideways so that when they grow apples, they don't snap off.
Oh.
I know. It's so complicated.
Did not expect all that when you planted trees, did you?
No. Now, here's the brilliant thing. Okay, is everyone listening? Now, apple trees, apparently, you have to have 3 of them near each other so they'll fertilize each other, right? So the little bees can like go between them and cross-pollinate, so they'll have fruit. But I was reading the small print on the website, and some of these trees self-fertilize. So I got one of those.
Oh, wow.
It fertilizes itself. That is a good trick, if you can do it, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll say no more.
When do you expect to enjoy the fruits?
I got 2 apples last year, and one of them had worms in it. But I feel like the only way is up.
Did you share it with the whole family, or did you?
Yeah, we sliced.
You did. Okay. All right. You mentioned something about music. What instruments do you play?
Well, I play guitar functionally, and I sing. And
oh wow, okay.
I was in so many bad bands.
The Beatles.
When I was younger.
Can we have a few names, please?
Yeah, sure. I was in. Well, some of these may. So it's always a name and the something or other, right? So so in college I was in Andrew Melville and the Pillmore Links. Pillmore Links was my address, and Andrew Melville was the dorm that the other members were in.
Okay.
I was in Norman Lamont and the Fat Prophets.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was, and then I got in a band we called ourselves the Blind Owls. That was the most successful band I was in.
Okay.
We were good enough to open for anybody but not get paid. And so we had a residency once a month in Soho in London at the 12 Bar Club. So that was kind of fun. And then that's before I went to Mississippi, but I wasn't stupid enough to think this white boy was going to play blues in Mississippi. So I instantly stopped playing blues. And then I got involved. This wasn't my band at all, but I got involved with the University of Mississippi Gospel Choir at the University of Mississippi, and produced an album for them, and got nominated for a Grammy. So that was
wow.
that was I got to go to the Grammys.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
amazing. Wow.
I know, that was a surprise. The whole time I was there, I was like, this is weird. This isn't my real life. This is never going to happen again. But yeah, that was fun. That was when was I there? I was there in 2001.
Okay.
Interesting.
And where are you from in England, Peter?
I'm from my parents, my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot, but basically from the southwest.
Okay.
Place called Glastonbury in Somerset.
Okay, you a soccer or American football guy?
I'm not an American football guy, and I wasn't really a real football guy either, except one of the places I lived and worked was Blackburn in Lancashire.
Okay.
And
Rovers.
And Blackburn Rovers, and it was the year that Alan Shearer was playing for Blackburn Rovers.
Oh, he did. Okay.
They were Kenny Dalglish was the manager, and they were chasing Manchester United for the double.
Oh wow. Okay.
And the whole town, it was like by osmosis, like you couldn't avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've lived in like football central, so I know what it's all about.
Do you follow England national team at all when they play
No,
in the World
I don't
Cup?
follow anything. Stuff just sort of happens, and I pay it, and then I watch it. I've kind of been watching Welcome to Wrexham. So strangely enough, I'm following Wrexham in the whatever division they're in.
Yeah, whatever the division, way below.
Yeah, way down. But yeah, and I don't follow American football.
Okay.
At all.
Yeah, food.
It's
One
a real football.
But one of the things that's very strange for an Englishman is how American high school is. Like, I found myself, so my son's involved in the marching band, so suddenly I have to go to every Friday night football game. And they're yellow school buses, and people are eating hot dogs, and they're cheerleaders. It all looks like a American high school movie, and it's really amazing. And I get to do it.
I think Chelsea has a question
about
about
my apple trees afterwards.
Yeah. Chelsea, thought you have a question about British English, American English?
Well, I did. So my friend asked one of my other friends, because he's French, if he thinks in French. And I asked Massine if he thought that you spoke, or you thought with an accent. Do you think with an American accent, or in your own personal?
Well, no, I just tried it. No, I think so. One of the strange things is, I mean, the first thing that went for me was my vocabulary, right? So you want to be understood, so you say trash can instead of rubbish bin.
Yeah, rubbish bin. Okay.
And then what happened was I could code switch, right? I knew where I was and what I'd say.
Mm.
But after a bit, so I've been in the States now for 27 years.
Oh wow.
I know that the word is different, but sometimes I can't remember which one's which.
Mm.
So, but my accent, I don't think has changed terribly much. In fact, it's maybe got a slightly more English. So, in England, there are lots of different regional accents, and I lived in different parts of the country, and I kind of picked up kind of some odd speech patterns from wherever I was. And when I when I lived in the States, I realized after about a year, it was like an acid bath. Like all the bits that had got stuck onto I probably sound much more like I did when I was a kid now, and all the extra stuff I accumulated. But it's a bit difficult when your name's Peter, because Americans can't hear that, right? It sounds to them like a flatbread that you'd slice open and put some salad into, right? So I have to say Peter. When I'm on the phone and and what's your name, sir? Peter. Because otherwise they'll write anything. You never know. I once had a woman say, "Pleased to meet you, pizza." Now, how are you spelling it? So there's some things that I've had to deliberately, what will you have? What will you be having with your meal? What would you like to drink? Water.
Yeah.
Because water, no one can hear that.
Oh, really?
It's all the sounds you're not expecting to hear.
So the big question is, do you feel more English still, or do you feel more American?
Well, I'm a U.S. citizen. I tell my students I'm more American than them because I've lived here longer than they've been alive, and I chose to be here.
You can
That's
answer
true.
more questions than they probably can too.
And not that. I mean, most of my students are American by accident. Let's be honest.
Right.
So I don't. It's very funny. So I'm not. English is sort of my first language. American isn't my first language, but they're basically the same. But so most of the time, I don't think there's a communication problem. But when I go back to the UK, I just suddenly find communication just like a lot easier. You only have to say the joke once for people to get it, kind of thing. And I can just feel it just is kind of more relaxing. So most of the time in the States, I'm not aware of it. But there is a mild communication barrier all the time. But at the same time, I've been out of the country, like I said, for 27 years. So here's a weird religion department. You said I'm a prominent member of the religion department, but there are three of us, so that's not we're all very prominent. And this year we've got a new colleague, Dr. Kirsty Jones, and when she applied for the job, there were certain things about the CV that kind of didn't make me realize what was going on. And we did our first round Zoom interviews, and it was 30 seconds into the Zoom interview. I was like, she sounds kind of funny. Why does she sound funny? And I was like, oh, she's English. So I didn't notice that she was speaking with an English accent. So we've got my colleague, Kirsty Jones is here, and she's significantly younger than I am. And we have very little shared pop culture.
Interesting.
Because, like I said, I left the country 27 years ago when Tony Blair had just been elected, and when having email was kind of a new thing, and long before smartphones. So I don't. When I go back to the UK, I don't. All my cultural references are American. They're not really British.
Yeah. I share the same experience. Being outside of Morocco for a while now. Last time we lived in Morocco for more than a year was back in 2010. So
yeah. So in that sense, I feel American. I'm living the dream. I've got a station wagon and 2 kids, and when I did the U.S. citizenship stuff, it was really the way I thought about it was bureaucracy catching up with reality. I mean, this is where I live. This is where I've invested my life, and this is where my kids are. My family is, and where my kids are going to grow up. So as Americans,
right.
So I feel American in that sense. Yeah, I have a T-shirt. This was from a few years ago, and it says, "I am an immigrant."
I think I came across that picture somewhere online.
And people look at me funny, right? And it's funny for an English person to wear because we don't think we're immigrants.
Yeah.
We think other people are immigrants, but we're expats.
That's true.
but no, I'm an immigrant, right? And so a lot of the things that I'm a first generation immigrant with all kinds of ambitions for my children. They're probably gonna.
It's interesting. Well, Dr. Slade, don't want to take up too much of your time. What final advice do you have for students looking to make the most out of their time at AU?
Oh, that's not a big question at all. Students making the most out of their time at AU. I think, so there's a movie, Sister Act, which is from the olden days. Whoopi Goldberg, you need to watch it. Whoopi Goldberg is escaping from the mob, so she's in a witness protection program, and she's disguised as a nun, and she's in a convent in LA, I believe. And I think it's in LA. It might be in New York. I don't know. Some big American city. New York. And and she's kind of miserable and kind of grumpy about it. And the Mother Superior comes into her room on the first night, and Whoopi Goldberg complains, but the nun says, "God has put you here. Take the hint." So I would say for students that you've got this time at university, and depending on your beliefs, God has put you here. Take the hint. So absolutely make the most of this opportunity. Some of the best learning you're going to get are from your fellow students, right? Sit around and talk about the things that really matter to you until you can't stay awake any longer and you have to go to bed. Go to the classes that interest you, as well as doing maybe some of the things you have to do. Take the opportunity to take every kind of class and explore everything you can. That's my advice, because this is leisure time. We don't think of it as leisure time. We think of it as hard work, but it's leisure time. You've got the opportunity to actually have the leisure to sit and think about stuff and read stuff. As life starts happening, you're going to look back on this and think, oh my gosh, I had so much time to do all the things I was interested in. Yeah, and do that. So that's my advice. Absolutely. God has put you here. Take the hint. Don't wish you're somewhere else. Absolutely invest in the people and the stuff you're studying and the sports clubs you're in and the extracurriculars you're in. There's time for sleeping after college. Absolutely do everything you can. You have to sleep, actually. You do have to sleep. But that's my advice. And this is a great place to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a really good piece of advice, and I feel like it can go on a t-shirt,
I wrote it down.
You did, okay.
That's the next rating on the WCC wall.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
okay.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Slade, for your wisdom and time and excellent contribution to AU, and we're very, very fortunate to have you with us here at AU and also in Ashland.
Thank you, Mohsin. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.